Hello, and welcome to Lawless Conversations with Katie. I'm Katie, your host. This podcast goes through various difficult subjects such as abortion, gun control, prison systems, or gender, to name a few, and dives into all different aspects of the arguments that might be offered or discussed. At the moment, we are wading our way through the subject of abortion, and today we are talking about bodily autonomy. Although I have spent a lot of time and effort into researching these topics, I am by no means an expert on this subject or any other subject I will explore in the future. So take my thoughts with a grain of salt, and of course, if you have any questions or things to add, please share them. I try my best to keep my own biases out of these explorations, and because I'm talking about many aspects of a subject, including opposing ideas and arguments, know that these are not necessarily ideas that I subscribe to or hold personally. I will, however, explore different arguments as if I do believe in them in order to truly explore all facets of this subject. Finally, because these are difficult subjects, there will be some content that is hard to hear and might be triggering. Please understand I am not looking to insult anyone, but to explore these subjects openly and honestly. I don't want to convince anyone to think like me. I want to convince people to think, period. So without further ado, come have a lawless conversation with me. There are those who want absolute bodily autonomy, and limiting abortion for any reason is insulting and infuriating. They see laws limiting abortion as taking away their rights to their body. Those who take this to extreme agree that a fetus is completely subject to the host and one should be able to abort it right up to birth. This requires a willful ignorance of embryo growth. Although there is no consensus on when life begins, there is a point later in the growth of the embryo that there are distinct signs of life. It is important to note that I don't think the majority of people who want bodily autonomy subscribe to such extreme thought. One cannot make this argument to such extreme without also admitting that something that is alive is being killed at some point, especially in the second and third trimesters. This fact is often not discussed or overshadowed by a virulent expression of "it's my body, my choice," which can be just as divisive and destructive to the discussion as stating that at conception one becomes a host and nothing more. This extreme or ignorant belief works to create an even greater gap separating the various sides of this issue. When those who believe in conception hear this rhetoric, they are aghast at the cruelty of someone to treat a living thing with such disregard. They look at later-term abortions and see them no longer as they are, which is majority due to life or death situations, and more as someone who can't make up their mind and thought nothing of the life inside them. Thus, they see all people who plead for a choice in this matter as abortion-hungry perverts who seek their own pleasure at the expense of unborn children. The facts, however, are very different. Women and men are quite aware of the potential for life and what it means to end that, even if those with an extreme view of choice like to differ. In some ways, this extreme view of autonomy can make sense. The host is the one who will be most consciously affected by any decision made, whether that is to keep or abort the fetus. Therefore, any alternative to the woman making that decision is taking her autonomy as an individual away. If one does not have this choice, it can then be assumed that one is less than in some way, by the nature of an inability to make choices. In this vein, there are those who hold to the concept of autonomy, but at a more realistic and moderate level. Those with a less extreme view of bodily autonomy look rather at the issue of placing one's body under the auspices of the government. For instance, anything subject to governance or law is also subject to change. Thus, women see a law against abortion as placing one's body into the hands of the ever-changing political and social plane. And this still counts even if one would like to talk about not a federal government mandate, but actually if it goes to the states as well. It is still a government, a state government, that is making those choices. There are laws that govern whether one can use their body in various ways to kill another person or force sexual acts of or to another person, but the issue of abortion is slightly more delicate. While laws on murder and assault do limit the body, these laws apply to all of humanity. Not so with abortion. Because of the changing nature of politics and government, there could be a shift in society where eugenics, say, once again becomes the prominent thought, and the presence of unwanted or undesirable traits leads to forced abortions or sterilizations. And this did happen in the past. When one does not have bodily autonomy in one scenario, then she would not be afforded autonomy in all other opposing scenarios. In this moderate view of autonomy, people see the need to protect the life or the potential for life from grotesquely late abortions, but also see the issue of choice to still be best placed in the hands of the woman, not the government, be it state or federal. On the subject of grotesquely late abortions, this is an element of the autonomy issue that often does not translate well between those who are pro-choice and those who are pro-life. When a woman wants full bodily autonomy, there is never a time when a woman desires to wait until month 8 or 9 to have an abortion. The desire for full bodily autonomy is a desire to fully govern one's body and one's choices. Most abortions happen at or before week 13. And one could likely guess that any later term abortions were not a choice of whim, but of life or death. This mistranslation comes about because when women want full bodily autonomy, pro-life people hear only that women want to be irresponsible and be able to kill their almost fully grown month 9 baby. This is not the case. Full bodily autonomy is about freedom from the government or anyone putting limits on women and thus having control over them in one way or another. This comes down to a very important question. Do you trust that women are capable of making this hard choice? If not, who is? If you do believe in bodily autonomy, how far does that extend? Does it go as far as hurting yourself or killing yourself? Should you have bodily autonomy in that way? Also, who is capable of making that choice, if not the woman? That last question at the end, I do actually want an answer to, because I have yet to find an acceptable answer to that question that makes sense. So I would love to hear what everyone's thought is of who is best capable of making that choice, if not the woman. If you're interested in commenting about this episode or answering any of the questions I just asked, you are welcome to. You can either send me an email at lawlessconversations@yahoo.com. That is LAWLESSCONVERSATIONS@yahoo.com. You can also comment on Twitter at lawlessconvos, LAWLESSCONVOS. Finally, you can also contact me on Facebook if you just look for Lawless Conversations, 2 different words, LAWLESSCONVERSATIONS. I look forward to hearing from you. The references to any sources that I use in each episode will be available in the bio, along with all of these social media connections. Join me next week as we dive into the next section of abortion, which is going to be conception and biochemistry. Thank you for joining me for this episode, and I look forward to next week.